Hi again, listeners. We are back footnoting on the Fancy Animation podcast with me, Chris Holliday.
And me, Alex Sargent.
We are still joined, thankfully, by Dr David McGowan, who is fresh, or we are fresh from recording, I should say, our episode on Mickey Mouse. We have kept David here to talk about something that came out. We almost sort of did it, but didn't quite do it. And it's a term that we have definitely talked about, but never really defined. So we're doing the kind of golden age, the sort of the golden age of, I'll put animation, but I'll also put maybe US animation in brackets. Now, David, I know, has written about this in lots of ways. I obviously mentioned his book, Animated Personalities, which is about characters and stardom in American theatrical shorts, largely of a particular period of time. And I know that he's recently completed a chapter on the golden age of American animation / the cartoon. So I'm really excited to sort of, I think this will be really valuable to a lot of students actually who are sort of fascinated by this era of Hollywood, both on animation courses and I think kind of in Hollywood history courses. It's something that is a really important. When I taught Hollywood animation, Hollywood cinema, I did a week on the golden age. So I wish we'd have done this earlier because I could have set you as the reading. Anyway, so David, thank you very much for still being here.
Thank you.
I will give you, well, Alex has got his.
I've got the timer.
Yeah, you got the timer. So, Golden Age, we just said to you, we'd like to do a footnote on the Golden Age. And so you can take that as you wish. But yeah, what do we mean by the Golden Age? How does it relate to animation / Hollywood animation?
Okay, yeah. So the Golden Age, I suppose, as its very name implies, is quite a mythologized concept.
Yeah.
It's one that has no sort of definitive boundaries. It's very much how we've kind of perceived it collectively. Often, sort of conveniently, the boundary between silent and sound filmmaking is usually seen as the point where the so-called Golden Age begins. We are seeing technologies being sort of introduced and crystallized that, I suppose, bring us towards what we consider to be a modern era of filmmaking, even though, as I've mentioned, there are many more kind of complex interplays between the silent period and the sound era than this kind of line in the sand implies. It's also a period, really, this notion of mythologizing, it's a period of economic domination, really, of these 8 major studios. Really, with the shifting to sound, but also the effects of the Great Depression, Hollywood goes from being an industry that was made up of quite a range of different studios, some big, some small, and even in the silent period there were kind of complaints about the big ones squeezing out the little players in the market. But the Great Depression and the kind of cost and technological upheaval of converting to sound creates a marketplace that's dominated by what is referred to as the Big Five, which is Paramount, MGM, Warner Brothers, RKO, and a studio that becomes 20th Century Fox, and the Little Three, which is Universal, Columbia, and United Artists. So although some smaller producers did exist during that period, in terms of live action, they were often referred to as the Poverty Row studios, sort of players that really struggled to kind of keep their foot in the door, and often relied on either very kind of like low cost distribution methods, or in some cases got the major players to distribute their films for them. In the case of animation, it's a little bit more complicated in that we do have a number of cartoon units that are independent producers. Disney, as an example, stays independent from any major studio throughout this Golden Age period. But what is kind of notable is this is a time where, if you are an animation producer, making a long-term deal with one of the majors is almost essential for your films to get any sort of like major distribution. And notably, in a number of cases, we see either previously independent producers being bought out and kind of subsumed within the studio system, or in some cases the studios just kind of creating their own in-house facilities. So yeah, basically, even if you weren't directly owned by one of the studios, when we talk about Golden Age animation, it is almost exclusively talking about films that were released by one of those major players.
So this is a period of economic stability, just like the classical era, sort of more broadly, or the golden age of Hollywood more broadly. Is this conceived of as a period of artistic achievement, and what are the artistic achievements, if it is?
Well, I maybe take issue even with economic stability.
Sure.
This is still a time where there was a lot of uncertainty, but I suppose the way these studios kind of endured, even if it was a bit shaky at times, was just their size. They kind of dominated not just production but distribution, and the Big Five especially, exhibition as well. They owned movie theatres, and so they had a kind of foothold in the business that even at times it was it wasn't plain sailing, but it allowed them to kind of endure in ways that some of the smaller producers didn't.
And that's vertical integration.
Vertical integration is the term often used.
Yeah.
So what's golden about it then? I guess is the question.
Well, just the I mean, that's the thing.
Hollywood tells us it's golden.
Yeah,
I think that's part of the.
It is the kind of mythology, really, is that it's golden for this handful of studios that, even though the market was shaky, they dominated almost all of the market. Between about 90 and 95% of films released by within America each year during that golden age period were released by one of the 8 majors. Obviously, if you're not one of those 8 majors,
very
then
ungolden.
Yeah.
Bronze.
So it's
tin.
It's definitely a period in which this system, Thomas Schatz kind of referred to it as the genius of the system. It creates this, on an aesthetic level, really, what's often seen as this quite sort of rationalised method of production where, the kinds of films that are released every year, the number of films released every year, the stars that are tasked to appear in them are sort of supposedly carefully kind of thought out and sort of made by this machine, really, that is very much using its size and its ownership of not just kind of the like the physical studio space, but through, again, quite restrictive employment contracts, its ownership of the on and off screen talent to to kind of churn out a significant number of films each year.
What role is, I don't know how we're doing for time, but I'm thinking of kind of technology, I'm thinking of kind of innovation, and within animation, I'm wondering, there's sort of, is animation just folded into the golden age, or is there you said that they're sort of slightly different, or there's slightly kind of shifting when we think of cartoon production, but what role does innovation or technological innovation do with the golden age, whether it's sort of multi-plane camera or... So I don't know, I'm just trying to think about the kind of innovative nature of this period.
Yeah, Norman Klein, who wrote the book 7 Minutes, talks about Disney, I suppose, through that studio's innovation, helping to essentially standardize what he calls full animation during that period.
Yeah.
So a certain quality standard of animation becomes an expectation that has to be achieved in some form. Klein talks about studios that aren't Disney and don't have the budgets of Disney, often having to kind of play up chase sequences and violence often as a way of kind of approaching that sort of visual quality associated with Disney. It has to be found in some form.
Yeah.
Things like the multiplane camera, Disney and to some extent the Fleischer Studio are perhaps most sort of visible in terms of experimenting and seemingly advancing the art of animation during that period. As I sort of talk about in my chapter that you kindly mentioned earlier, there are debates as to how rationalized some of those choices were. Even sort of Disney, and again to some extent Fleischer's pursuit of the animated feature, this desire to move animation beyond the short film market, which it frequently was kind of stuck within in the golden age, potentially marked a sort of form of risk-taking that went beyond what could be entirely achieved during the so-called golden age. Real-life events like World War II, or the kind of the political ramifications leading up to that, closed marketplaces that Disney in particular had relied upon to make such a a lavish animated prestige feature. He wanted to compete with some of those big players. And although essentially, Disney and Fleischer's pursuit of the animated feature and the kind of technological innovation that went along with that, was an output of the Golden Age period, I would argue that it perhaps to some extent didn't reach its rational stage during that time. It's perhaps only really with even maybe like the Disney Renaissance of the 90s, where and the rise of the computer animated feature, where the sort of the prestige animated feature becomes an increasingly viable output of the Hollywood system.
Great.
So, yeah, the Golden Age period is one of a lot of ambition, but also, some dead ends. We get some high quality animated productions, but ones that aren't always conducive to what the system can bear at that particular time.
Yeah.
We could ask you so much more about this, but we're running out of time. So just as a kind of question, please cite your article again on this that people can look to. And are there any other scholars that you've not mentioned? You mentioned Schatz, you've mentioned, but maybe some scholars devoted to this period, in particular in terms of animation, that would be useful for people who are interested in this topic to kind of go and explore.
Yeah, I think certainly Michael Barrier's book Hollywood Cartoons, Leonard Maltin's Of Mice and Magic.
Yep.
Although they occasionally get a bit of flack for not citing sources quite as forcefully as we do it sort of academically, they are notable examples of academic works that have kind of tried to encapsulate the entirety of the Golden Age period, and in some cases beyond. Other things that we don't really have time to kind of talk about, but scholars like Carl Cohen, his book Forbidden Animation, kind of touches on sort of issues of, again, this golden age not always being entirely golden for everything and everyone who is represented within these films. That this very celebrated period was still rife with stereotyped and outdated racist and sexist and many other representations that again belie this kind of sentimental notion of this being a hallowed period. I'd also just very quickly mention Tom Sito's book Drawing the Line, which talks about the rise of animation unions, primarily in the Golden Age period, but also moves up to the present day. He also talks about this kind of notion of the below-the-line worker that, again, for many animators working during this period, they were creating some of these beloved characters like Bugs Bunny and Mickey Mouse, but the kind of workloads, the salaries, the artistic recognition that they received were really quite sort of poor. And it sort of speaks to that idea, I suppose, that I began with, that the Golden Age is a mythology that.
Sure.
Golden for who?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Always love a bit of myth busting on the podcast. So David, thanks so much for busting those myths. Really interesting to hear about the Golden Age and its problems, both in the period and as we try to historicise it. If you have suggestions for other Footnote episodes, you can email us at fananimresearch, FANANIM research@gmail.com. Otherwise, we'll see you next time.
Bye.